sir. Why does Mobile have such a high crime rate index?
Personally, I believe that it's because of the huge influx of narcotic traffic in the Mobile area, especially the hard narcotics. I think that most people who are involved with burglaries, larcenies, robberies, and even some cases homicides are either indirectly or directly linked to narcotics. Secondly, I think the crime rate in the city of Mobile is not confined and is not a local one. I think it's statewide, and I think it is a direct result of one or two or three people who call themselves legislators in Montgomery who have continually killed valuable crime legislation, things that would do the public of this state and this community just worlds of good. And let me mention a few. One is the Habitual Offender Act. We need to deal with repeat career offenders, and we need laws to take care of them. Two is we need nighttime search warrant legislation so that we can give our narcotics people the opportunity to search at nighttime. Three, we need a Reciprocal Witness Act in Alabama that allows the state to bring witnesses back from outside the state. We don't have that right now. Two, I think the people as a whole ought to have the same strikes on a jury as a criminal does. Right now, the criminal has 2-to-1 strikes. Most other states do not have that. That should be taken care of. We need to repeal or amend the good time laws. We need the legislature, again, getting back to that legislature, to provide the Board of Corrections with enough money to build prisons. If a convict or a criminal knows that there's no place to put him, he's got nothing to lose. So I think it's narcotics and 2 or 3 people in the legislature. Our legislative delegation as a whole is crime-oriented, and when I say that, they vote for those packages, but when it gets over in the Senate, 2 or 3 senators, and not our senators, kill it. And as a result, we don't have the tools to do our job with.
Well, what excuse do these people give?
I think there's no excuse alleged. The only excuse they've got is that they call themselves effective politicians, and they play petty politics, they play special interest politics, and when it comes down to something that's worthwhile for the people in the way of a crime package, they don't care. It's what can further their political ambitions in Montgomery, and that's no excuse.
Does unemployment have any effect on crime?
I think it does to a certain degree, Dick, but not to the point to where it did years ago. You know, when you used to have a thief, he stole for
More violent crime, not only crime of a general nature, but we have murders, rapes, kidnappings. Why? Aside from the legislation, is there anything you can put your finger on as a district attorney?
Well, you know, as far as domestic and passion murders, they're going to go on. I mean, you're going to have those regardless of what laws you have. But the bizarre, violent type criminal acts, I can't answer the question. I can answer the one concerning shooting people in robberies of convenience stores.
Quarles, a psychologist, I believe he was, for mental health in Washington, D.C., very recently on National Network, said that there is no such a thing as a passion crime. A husband may kill his wife, but he said mentally he has killed her many times before he pulled the trigger. And so he ruled out what you're considering passion crime.
This is a psychologist?
Yes.
Well,
Do you agree with that at all?
You know, I deal in practicalities, Dick, and I deal with people, and I deal with them on a basis of factual data. Psychiatrists and psychologists deal on something that isn't factual. It's not based on any science. They deal on subjective things, and that's just his personal opinion. Sure, I think that they're passion killings, and I think that they're jealousy and envy killings and fights in bars that are going to go on forever. We're not going to be able to stop that unless you do away with all the bars.
All right, now we're not unique to the rest of the country relative to crime, really. People kill every place. Why would some locations have relatively no crime, yet have the same conditions that we have here to work under, and we would have a high one?
Well, Dick, I think it all boils down to, are you lenient toward those criminals in your particular locale, or are you taking a tough, hard approach to it? And my position is you cannot be too hard on a repeat offender, a violent offender, you cannot even be unreasonable with him. The tougher you treat him, the better off society's going to be. And I think the problem with our situation in Mobile is that the system's been too lenient on them. And in other areas of the state, they've been tough. In New Orleans, Louisiana, they take a hard-nosed, tough approach, and they brought crime down over there. And that place, if any place, should be a horrible place to live in as far as crime. But they've done something about it by being harsh on criminals and taking a tough approach to a repeat offender and a violent offender, a career criminal. I've tried to do that, but it takes the cooperation of the judges and law enforcement. I know law enforcement would want to do that. I just hope the judges would too.
Do you think that lifestyle, home ties, family ties, lifestyle, and religion, or lack of any of these, will have any part really in your statistics?
I don't think it'll play that big a part, Dick. Obviously, education and lifestyle plays a part in the criminal statistics, but not to a degree that it's going to affect it at all. Now, we're a port city, and we've got a lot of transit people here, and quite frankly, we've got prostitutes walking the streets of downtown Mobile where they'll knock on your window at nighttime while you're driving out of town to go home at night. And the police only have so many people, and you got to place your priorities at where your problems are. And obviously, if you got residential burglaries and robberies going on, you want your people out there surveilling and patrolling those streets, and you can't bring your whole police department downtown to round up a bunch of prostitutes. But at the same, rape is going up in Mobile County, and I think if you looked at the statistics, a lot of those are being reported by these so-called prostitutes in downtown Mobile. When they don't get their money, they'll go complain and say they were raped. And when the man pays them the money, they drop the charges. You notice it's reported crime.
Yes.
And these are reported rapes. Now, there are a lot of rapes that are cruel, horrible rapes, but it hadn't gone up that much. It's these prostitutes that are making all these reported complaints.
Statistically, how many police should we have per 1,000 people?
You know, I can't answer that question, but I do know that most cities our size have much larger police departments and pay their policemen a heck of a lot more and require training and education and give incentive pays for those who have educations and continue their learning degrees. I don't understand why the city of I can't understand how the city of Mobile Police Department protects our citizens as well as they do, understaffed, underpaid, and undertrained as they are.
All right. Do you think yourself, based on your experience in office, that the city officials have given proper consideration to the problem of transients, the migrants coming in to find work?
I don't know, Dick. I haven't been close enough to city government.
Does this element cause your office any concern?
Not that much. I don't think we are faced with repeat career criminals that have been hanging around Mobile and go to jail and come out, go to jail and come out. I mean, you can, I've been down here 7 years and I've seen 2 or 3 people go through the system 2 or 3 times. We have a few that break into homes during the Christmas season, holiday season, that are transits, migrants. We had a hobo killing down here 2 or 3 years ago, but you don't see that many transits involved in criminal activity here in Mobile.
All right, now in violent crime murder, since the beginning of the year, we've had nearly 30 brutal murders of one type or another, either an armed robbery murder, a domestic murder, contract killings, and senseless. And for a town this size, it is becoming frightening to the people, and there's got to be a reason other than legislation. I mean, the very fact that the act is being committed by so much of it here.
Well, you had your killings in convenience stores, pawn shops, interstate highway. That was a contract killing. You've had the individual that I'm not allowed to talk about. What other brutal? You had the Doty double slaying. You had the double slaying just the other night down in the south part of the county. a lot of these individuals came from outside Mobile into Mobile. The contract killing was a planned set-up thing. It happened as a result of narcotics. It was it goes way back to when one guy accidentally shot the other one's brother. These two individuals that just recently pled guilty to the electric chair, they were on it for a crime spree, having fun, doing...
Go ahead.
Or do you favor some type of gun control similar to that of Massachusetts, where you've got a mandatory jail sentence for carrying a gun without a permit?
Dick, I'm not sure I do, because I think criminals are going to get guns, either by breaking into homes, stealing them from businesses, or their associates. And making it mandatory, a mandatory gun control law is not going to take the gun out of the criminal's hands or keep him from getting it. All it's going to do is really prohibit those people who are law-abiding citizens the right of carrying a gun. It might, to a certain degree, cut down on the availability of guns, and it might help in the area of where we say passion killings. But someone said, well, if you have no gun in the house and you're going to commit a passion crime, you'll get a knife or a bat or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't
But
think...
that takes a little more courage, doesn't it?
I would think so. It's a physical contact,
Yeah.
whereas all you have to do is pull a trigger, and
Right.
I would think you would not need as much courage.
Are there any gun runners in this area?
Oh, sure, we've got them. We know of people that you can place orders with, and like I mentioned, who these individuals are. It's very difficult to apprehend them because they do the majority of their business at nighttime, and we can't search in Alabama at nighttime because the legislature hadn't given us that right. And as a result, dope dealers and gun runners are moving their equipment and produce at nighttime. And we're handcuffed, police are handcuffed and stopping it.
All right, now as we acquire more industry, those that are now under construction and those that we will encourage to come here, what is your problem going to be in 10 years from now?
Industry and population, obviously, is going to make the crime worsen in this community. I think that goes hand in glove. When you see, especially in the white-collar economic criminal activity, sophisticated crime, the more industry and the more population you have, the more white-collar criminal actions you have. So we've got to have trained, skilled police officers to detect that. We'll also have more street crime. As population rises, criminal activity is going to rise. It's just a hand-in-glove, horse before the wagon type thing. And that's just something that we are going to have to face, plan on, beef up our police department, and train them. But we need that now. We need it immediately. We don't need to wait till 10 years from now.
Do you think we have an effective police department?
For the size, they are as effective as they possibly can be. As far as their training, they're effective. As far as this little training that they have, and as far as dedication, they are unbelievable, because you have to be dedicated to risk your life and be paid $500 or $600 every day and have to work 3 jobs to support your family and be a police officer. Quite frankly, I don't know how we retain good people on the police department. Yes, I think we're effective, but how effective can 4 narcotics agents be in 200,000 people? How effective can a criminal investigation division be when you only have 2 or 3 detectives working the night shift? How effective can city patrolmen be when you only have 27 patrolmen in the entire city patrolling the area?
You're talking about per shift.
Per shift. It's ridiculously low, and they're, as, like I say, they're as effective as their staff and training and pay. You get what you pay for, Dick, and I'm not saying that we need to throw a whole bunch of more men out there, but they're understaffed, and they're doing the job the best that they can at the time. And, you know, we have to prosecute the cases they make, and I get quite upset sometimes when I see foolish errors made on behalf of their... But when you sit back and think, goodness gracious, they're having to respond to 5 or 6 burglaries within their territory, and it's only 1 or 2 men, and you got 4 detectives covering the entire city.
What percentage of cases are thrown out of court because of policeman error in arrest? Roughly.
That's difficult to say.
50%?
No, I wouldn't say it's that
80%?
high. I would say it's quite low.
20.
I would say maybe 10 to 20%.
Chief Riddle, in your opinion, why does Mobile have such a high crime index?
Well, I don't know. I think it would be real hard to pinpoint any one particular factor. There's probably several things that we could consider. And right off at the top, I would think that our number one problem, and I realize it's very involved and it's very complicated and it involves a lot of people, but it would appear to me that over a period of time, that my personal observation has been, it would appear that the same people are prone to commit the crime. Now, of course, when we make this remark, we think in terms of incarceration, parole, rehabilitation, and this sort of thing. And of course, this gets away from my bailiwick. I'm the enforcement officer. So I can't give you all the answers here. I simply don't know. But I do know that we get the same people over and over again.
Well, now, what about violent crime, murders and whatnot? You don't get the same people over and over there.
Well,
but we have more of that than...
We have had the same people here for murder repeatedly. Well, that is for more than one offense over a period of time. But let's say for robbery, we repeatedly get these people over and over again, burglary, larceny, assault, and this sort of thing.
And why can't you control them?
Well, I can't control them because my job, or our job here in the police department, is to try to determine who the perpetrator is and take them to court and hopefully to obtain a conviction. And once the evidence is presented in court, why, that's the end of our job there.
So then you're saying the courts are to blame?
No, I'm not saying that. No, I'm definitely not. I'm saying it involves a lot of people, of course. Let's say that a man may be sentenced in court. Over a period of time, of course, he may go to penitentiary. I don't know how long he may or may not stay, but eventually he's going to come back to us, and it appears that he's doing the same thing over again. We find that some of them, of course, appear back on our streets long before we normally would think that they would be here, and they commit violent crimes over again.
Do you think the general lifestyle of the citizens of Mobile and religion would play any part in the high crime rate?
Well, what do you mean now when you say, do I think that the
close
lifestyle...
family ties, lack of close family ties, strong religious convictions, or less than strong? Does it have, statistically, does it have anything to do with a high or a low crime rate, in your opinion?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think that probably Mobile is just like any other city. I don't have any idea that our people are any different than any other city. I certainly don't.
Do you think unemployment has anything to do with a high crime rate or a low crime rate?
Well, I definitely think that unemployment would be a factor in any jurisdiction. And I think that as unemployment rises, then I think you can look for some bit of an upsurge in your crime. I certainly do. From larceny right on up. I think you can, yeah.
All right, now there is a continuing argument among law enforcement people that one man to a car is as effective as two men to a car, where you have large areas to patrol. In your opinion, would you be better off with two, or are you satisfied with one?
Well, I'm sure you know that provided enough people, of course, I think it would be foolish for you and I to say that one man could do the job that two could do. By the same token, I think perhaps what we've done here in Mobile is that over a period of time, Mobile has gone to the one-man car concept in order to try to give our people here as much coverage and police protection as they possibly could. Now, if we had the same amount of cars rolling with 2 men in them as we have with 1 man, and of course this would be good, and I'm sure it would be certainly be a help. But here again, I'm sure that you have to consider the taxation upon the people and this sort of thing.
All right,
Just
now the
so
other
much
day
available.
you had a shootout the other day, the young boy in the condominium.
Yes.
That was your night shift that was involved in that. Now, normally, how many cars would you have on a night in round numbers?
Oh, roughly, if we run every car, we'd probably have 27 cars.
All right, on for nighttime.
Right.
Now, you had far more cars and far more policemen all night at that shootout. You had upwards of 60, I believe.
Well, what we'd done was this. We gathered everything that we could muster in view of the circumstances. And we had some assistance to handle our local calls, well, our normal calls, not local calls, but our normal calls for assistance. We were aided by the Sheriff's Department and by the Pritchard officers in this regard during the time that we had the situation going. And we diverted all of our efforts into this one particular direction until we were able to clear it up and get back to our everyday work.
And so the rest of the city then was protected, so to speak, by the sheriff and other municipal police departments. Is that correct?
This is correct, right.
All right, now you are working under a court order, your department. What does that court order say?
Well, of course, we're working under a court order regarding the assignment of blacks and whites. This is what you're making reference to.
I don't know how.
Well, I'm
what it
sure
does
this is what you're making reference to, and in effect and basically it relates to the assignment of whites in black neighborhoods, blacks in white neighborhoods, and white officers assigned to, if there is or if there are the availability for 2 officers to a car, that they be assigned black and white until all the personnel has been utilized or used up. And then, and not until then, would you consider the use of 2 blacks or 2 whites. Basically, that's
right. So then, in effect, the court has limited your ability to have 2 men to a car. You don't have that many blacks on the force.
Well, no, we don't have that many blacks on the force. It's simply up to us to manage our business from day to day and be in a position to so advise the court at any time that the need may arise or any time that we are called on to do so. The fact that if we did operate 2 whites in a car or 2 blacks in a car, why it was done this way, you say.
How effective, where you have 1 man to a car, basically, we're going now to the beat patrolman. We do not have beat patrolmen as such. I believe there are probably 2 in the downtown area that visit the stores and whatnot. And it's my understanding from past conversations that 1 man to a car can accomplish more than the beat patrolman. Am I correct? What's your attitude toward the beat patrolman?
Well, of course, when you think of beat patrolman, generally people go back with their thoughts and they're thinking of what happened 35 or 40 years ago or 25 years ago. And I'm sure that we just simply can't look at it that way. Now, the officer who's motorized in a car can certainly give you greater coverage and better protection being equipped with 2-way radio communication service as opposed to one that's walking. Let's say that the one that's walking, and nowadays, of course, even equipped with communication can only cover so much. Now, and about the best and the greatest utilization is where you have a congested shopping area or a congested commercial area that would require the need for this sort of thing. But you got to remember that our city is so large that to think of covering the trouble spots in our area by beat patrol, walking beat patrol, but it's just simply unreal. It couldn't be done.
All right.
It's too big.
Troubled areas. Is, in fact, our troubled areas primarily resided by blacks, resided in by blacks? Is the black community your basic problem as a law enforcement officer?
Well, of course, both of our communities, black and white, are problems. Dick, there's sometimes when the black community poses a bigger problem than whites, as far as individual crime problem are concerned.
80% of the jails are filled with blacks. That would suggest they are the biggest problem.
Well, insofar as crime is concerned, we have white offenders and black offenders both. As you know, there's many times that you don't know who committed your crimes, whether they're black or white. And of course, you have to go by the known offenders.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the ones that you know that actually committed crime. And we have a great number of black offenders. But by the same token, we also have some whites here, too, and a goodly number of them.
Going back to the court order, would a union, if your department were unionized, either AFL-CIO or a legislative bill enacted that would give the same protection that a union would give your men, would it have any effect on the court order?
Well, I don't really know, but I wouldn't think so. This is a federal court order by a federal judge, and until he rescinds it or whatever, why, of course, that's the way it's going to be.
Would you favor legislation, a legislative bill that would do the same thing that a union would do, but would not come under AFL-CIO?
I don't know, basically, what you're saying.
This would control them from top to bottom. Salaries, days off, seniority system.
Well, I don't know. I think before I could say that I would favor any system, regardless of what it might be. Certainly I would be in favor of whatever was right and fair, but I'd certainly have to know what it was and what it involved before I could give you an answer there.
All right, John. Have I left anything out, John?
That's an answer.
Okay, go ahead. All right, sir.
So in an area such as that in Scranton, where you have a very heavily Catholic percentage, you have beyond that, though. You have an ethnic loyalty, an ethnic identity, and an ethnic cohesiveness in the homes and in the neighborhoods, of which the Catholic faith is a great part. But the religious denomination doesn't determine that whole thing. And these people who are Polish or Italian or Lithuanian, these people have a strong family loyalty and love and identity. And it's what I said before that you find with the Chinese people. You find it in some cases with our Jewish people. And they have this same thing. And the root of it, the heart of it, is, of course, a strong allegiance to these traditions and these Jewish Christian values that I mentioned before, that when you make a commitment before God to a marriage, that is for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, that is till death. And you believe that and you live that. And it's a disgrace if you don't.
Can man respect man and his laws and not respect God?
Ultimately, that's the old question. Ultimately, I don't think so. I think there has to be, ultimately, a reason for living, a reason for putting up with just the stress and trials and difficulties of life. And people find their values have to have reason. And they get worn down if they don't have a real strong motivation. And the motivation, again, that we get from the scriptures, from the Catholic or Protestant tradition where it's fully taught, is a responsibility, a personal responsibility that I someday have to face the Lord for everything I do or do not do, and that this has social ramifications. It's not just something of going to church on Sunday. And sometimes there's too much of that. I remember an old man said, an old, very fundamental believer, he said, you know, some people can be so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. You know, they go to church all the time and they mouth pious phrases and they mouth scripture, but they couldn't give a hoot about the needs of their neighbor. They couldn't give a hoot about the welfare of their community. They couldn't give a hoot about other people who happen not to belong to their narrow little denominational view. And there's a lot of that.
All right, now, we are becoming more industrialized by the day. We have people tell us it's a lack of money that's causing our problem, legislature, the courts, the infighting between, the warring between political factions and all of this sort of thing. What would your prognosis be for Mobile for 10 years hence, relative to crime?
Relative to crime, well, I think with growing employment, hopefully, with growing development, you know, this community could become a better community offering more opportunity, and it hopefully could improve greatly. But still, it's going to depend, even more than any of those factors, it's going to depend on, I think, our values. Where do we put our values?
Do you think that can be instilled in the people, the desire?
I think a lot of it possibly can be improved. We're going to have cross-fertilization in a sense. You know, people coming here, hopefully from different parts of this country, and some of the things you talk about that you found in another part of the country will come here with people who come. And there will be different views and different outlooks, and perhaps an amalgamation of new thinking that may be of great enrichment to us. We don't have the answer to everything, and we shouldn't ever think that we have the best of all possible worlds. And maybe we can grow into a broader and a deeper understanding of what this whole life is about that we live here.
You believe that?
I hope so. I don't know. I can't foresee the future, obviously. That would be my hope, though.
All right, Dick.
Bishop, in your opinion, why do we have a high crime rate in Mobile?
Well, there are many, many factors, and I think, however, to perhaps oversimplify a little, I think basically it's the real questioning in our time of the basic primary family authority. I think if you look around the country, one of the phenomena in this whole question is the very, very low crime rate among children of Chinese people. Now here you got a people without the same religious tradition that we have, but they have in their whole culture a great regard for parents and for people of authority, and especially older people. This has been built in, and they just feel that to do anything that would discredit or dishonor or hurt in any way their parents would be the worst thing they can do. And so they have that, and it's not a matter of education, it's not a matter of poverty, it's with them, it's a matter of that deep family loyalty and love.
Right. Well, now, we're basically a Christian nation. How have we strayed so far?
I think we have strayed. Jewish Christian family tradition. You take a look at our recreational standards today, at the attitude with regard to marital fidelity, with regard to divorce, and so on in our society, the easy acceptance of all these things, in fact, the glorification in many cases. Just take a look at the soap operas, at the great molders of public opinion. Take a look at our print media, the various publications, the questioning of marriage, the questioning of the Jewish Christian standard of faithfulness in marriage and of all it entails. You know, this has been going on now in the so-called new morality, the so-called sex revolution. And we have questioned it from one end of the social spectrum to the other. And these kids are being raised in this whole milieu and this whole attitude. And the social fabric is being torn asunder through this neglect of what we pay lip service to, but which we aren't really teaching and upholding.
And who is responsible? The parent, the church, who?
I think we're all responsible. I think to a great extent the courts and the educational people, and the church has watered down to a great extent its strong adherence to what Jesus says with regard to marriage and the commitment that people have to make to marriage, and so on.
All right, Doctor, why would we in this area have such a high crime rate relative to violent type crimes? What's wrong with us?
Well, as the answer I gave you a while ago when we were talking about this is that, first of all, I don't know. I can speculate. I think you might find more clues about why we do by studying a place like Scranton, Pennsylvania, where you don't have such a crime rate, and try to figure out what the factors are, some of which you've mentioned. In general, violent crime, and I don't think that Mobile is peculiar in this respect, most violent crimes are still committed at home, committed by people against people whom they know very well and either related to or married to.
We have a lot of armed robbery murders.
Well, when you get into murder for profit, that's a different category entirely. Some of these have to do with, or alleged to have to do with the rate of unemployment, difficulty of finding jobs and so forth. And you might say that most of these are probably amateur criminals. They haven't made a life work of it and studied it. By the very fact that they get caught so often, the truly professional armed robber doesn't get caught quite so frequently as that.
Could lifestyle and religion have anything to do with our high crime rate or Scranton's low crime rate, in your opinion? Does that really
Well, I
have
think so. The example that came to mind when you mentioned the ethnic composition of Scranton was the example of the American Japanese and the American Chinese. This is another group in which you have a very tight-knit family, very paternalistic, authoritarian, in which the children know exactly what the rules are. There's no confusion about it, and the rules have been consistent for generations. In that group, there's very little crime, and very little even minor juvenile delinquency, which is a great help to the people on the West Coast, you know, because they have so many of them. I don't know how much of a part religion plays with those two groups, because some of them have become Christians, and some are still Buddhists, and some are Shinto, and so on. I don't know how much of a part that plays. I'm inclined to suspect that the solidarity and the tightness of the family constellation might have more to do with it.
Why are we different then?
Well, for one thing, we're a port city. Port cities have always been a nest of confusion, strange tongues, strange customs, drunken sailors, vagrants floating in and out from as far away as South America. So you don't have anything like, say, the consistent culture that you might have in, say, a small pocket of Chinese or Japanese or Yugoslavs or Ukrainian. You have, you know, the black population, which is what, about 25%? Most
Here?
of the state. It's
34 here.
34 here. Yeah, well, many parts of the state it's around 25. They have their own subculture. I would say probably the middle class and upper class socioeconomic part of the black group have values and standards just about corresponding to those of the white group at the same level. The others have different standards, just as lower class whites have different standards. So you have, and then you have a variety of religions. You have plenty of Catholics here, but I don't know what the percentage is. A variety of different religious sects. There's no real uniformity in a community like Mobile at all. You have French and Spanish and Indian and late arrivals. A good many outlanders came down with industry up and down the Mobile and Alabama River. They haven't had a chance to become, truly integrated into the Mobile style of life, if something like that really exists.
Now, what's the answer?
I don't know. I think that this is the kind of thing that anthropologists and sociologists spend not only hours but years studying, trying to find out what are the familiar and common. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, we all have grown up in psychiatry, and also I suspect in sociology and in anthropology, with certain truisms that aren't always true, such as a person who grows up in a slum has good reason to become a criminal and is very likely to become a criminal. There seems to be some truth in that, but on the other hand, there are many people who grow up in slums and become distinguished citizens, and who join the police force and work the other side of the street, and they all grew up in the same neighborhood. So that doesn't follow directly. Then you get into things like family structure. What was this person's position in the family that inclined him toward a career of crime? And then you get into things like genetics. There's some types of criminal, Speck, as in Chicago, that killed all the nurses, is a good example, who have definite genetic abnormalities that can be spotted through genetic methods, microscopic examination of the chromosomes, and you can see that they are indeed different, and that helps to explain why they behave that way. If you get into the area of professional criminals, there's some wonderful paragraphs about that subject in a book called The Great Train Robbery, in which the author points out that crime does pay, and that many, many crimes are never solved, particularly large crimes are never solved, and that some people go into criminal activity as professionals because they prefer it, just as some people choose politics or big business. It's a challenge to a person with plenty of brains and ingenuity and courage and nerve, and that helps to explain some of the people in the syndicate.
All right. In our position here in Mobile, do we only have money, more police, more cars, the authority that this gives to look forward to solve our problem? Can we even maintain the status quo?
Well,
as we progress, as we get in more industry and so forth.
I'm impressed, perhaps I would rather say I take comfort in the long-term historical view of crime in big cities. And Mobile can now classify itself as a fairly big city. If you read books from the 16th and 17th century, you will readily see that this is the way the situation was. Say, if you tried to get through Paris by yourself without having your purse cut or your throat cut, you were a very rash man indeed, because the situation was there. It was something like the way it is now in Washington, D.C., where you can get mugged in broad daylight, and there are gangs roaming around in New York and New Jersey and so forth. It's a cyclical thing, and sometimes people blame it on rapid industrialization. They blame it on the breakup of the nuclear family. It probably has dozens of causes in each situation, in each town, and I doubt that they're identical. Probably, if the next stage of your study would take you to Savannah or Charleston or New Orleans or Galveston, Texas, you might find some areas in common along the coast that would tie into what goes on in Mobile. But the common factors having to do with poverty, the breakdown of religion, the breakdown of the family, and so forth, they're everywhere. I don't know that Mobile has anything specific to offer in that respect.
So then what is happening to us is a normal thing for a city on the move, as they say.
I suspect so. I suspect if we were having this interview 100 years from now and had at our command all the police files going back for 100 years, and then 100 years before that, we would find waves of relative tranquility succeeded by waves of crime and chaos, and it's been going on like that for a long time. If the sociologist, it's sort of like studying the business cycle. If the sociologist could tell us exactly what makes the cycles go, we'd be very much ahead.